Welcome. I'm Pam Laricchia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Michelle Morcate. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Pam. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, yay. I'm so excited to chat with you. Just as a little intro, I was introduced to Michelle through Erica Ellis, who was a guest on the podcast in episode 201. So yes, I'm really excited to learn more about your unschooling experience. So to get us started, can you share with us a bit about you and your family and what everybody's into right now?
Okay, definitely. I'm Michelle. I live in Florida with my husband and my two kids. My son is 9 and my daughter is about to turn 12. My background is in educational and exceptional student education. I've always loved to work with kids, and I especially love learning about like the process of how we all learn. So that's like one of my big areas of interest. And in our family, we're definitely like deep divers into our area of interest. And something I love about our family life right now is that we really get to each kind of zone into our individual interests, and the joy that brings each of us, but also how we get to kind of enjoy each other's interests. And we get to kind of really see the joy of everyone else's interests and maybe kind of learn a little bit from each of everyone else's interests that we might not have kind of been exposed to or kind of chosen to do on our own. So we get to share that. And so when I was kind of asking my family the questions of like, what does everyone like about like our unschooling life right now? And so my husband got to share that for him, he really enjoys the fact that we kind of have this like established, not super scheduled, but we try to do it as often as we can, like a family time where we watch like either a movie series or a show series that the kids are really into and want to watch with us. And so he's like, I get to watch there, like things that I might not have watched on my own, but I get to see it with the kids and it's really fun and I get to really enjoy that experience. And it's something that we may not have done on our own, like a show that we wouldn't have watched on our own. Like we may not have watched Gravity Falls on our own or Star versus the Forces of Evil. But we really all kind of love to like have this time together and really share that experience together. And so I think watched like the series of Korra and The Last Airbender, I think like 3 times at least, like the whole thing together. And each time it's still awesome. So we get to really enjoy that together. And I think for my son, he's really into now like animation and character development, and he loves to make his own characters and his own worlds. And so that's super cool. And we get to really kind of enjoy that through his imagination. I get to really see like these worlds that he creates. And so that's kind of led us into D&D or Dungeons and Dragons, which is like the role-playing game, which I'd never played before. And so he's really gotten us all into that. And it's been so fun because now it's like a family thing that we do together. Sometimes he's more ready and my husband, so they'll play, but then when we all get to do it together, it's super fun. And just getting to like share that joy and that experience and that imagination is awesome. My daughter's really into The Sims, which is like a kind of like a virtual life game, like a life simulation game. And she's also really into history. And so kind of seeing how she connects both of those within the game is just amazing to me. Like she makes these awesome like houses, but they're like historically influenced from different times and different characters. And now she's photoshopping them. And so it's just so cool to kind of get to like jump into their minds and their imaginations and how they see things. So that's really awesome that we get to kind of share that together. And then my area of interest is really kind of just enjoying this with them. And then also continuing to, like, I'm a big reader. I love to read about how kids learn, how people learn. I'm really into kind of being like an ally right now for different groups of people, and specifically learning about like how to be an advocate for like neurodiversity and kind of supporting how each individual person learns and that need that we all have to be accepted. And I just kind of love how unschooling fits in there, and like just being able to kind of be in that type of lifestyle right now and kind of really wishing that I could kind of share that with everybody. That like if everyone got to have that type of experience, like how different our stories would be if everyone got to have that chance to really find that joy in themselves and that joy in their learning process. And so that's kind of where we're at right now.
Oh, that's amazing. And there were a couple of things that jumped out at me so beautifully. As I'm trying to put them all together, but the first piece was how it's so incredible seeing how our kids individually bring themselves to what they do. Like when you mentioned your daughter and how she's playing The Sims, like if your son was interested in The Sims, he'd be playing it totally differently.
In a totally different way.
Yeah. And as unschooling parents, to see that, like, with your interest in learning and everything, just noticing that, I think is a big layer of understanding to peel back when we're deschooling, right? It's not like they're playing a game. Two kids are playing the game, so they're like both interested in the game. No, to see how they bring themselves, their full selves, and their interests and the things that they love and the things they're not particularly interested in, and just their strengths, right, in the things that they like to do and how they like to do them. Like they bring their full selves into thing they do, right? That's just so fascinating.
I love it. Yeah. Like you see their personality, you see them developing their interests and developing their understanding of what they like and how they like to interact with what they're learning. And that's just so cool.
Yeah. And the other piece was when you were talking about like family activities. So everybody, and how you were watching series that you would never have like chosen for yourself, but how you're fully enjoying that. Like, that was my experience as well. My kids would be interested in shows and stuff, and I'd say, let's watch them. We'll watch them together. And I mean, I remember Supernatural is still on, but that came from Lissy, like in its first season. So, and it's like got 15 seasons now, and I'm still watching it. She hasn't seen the last few seasons. But for a number of years, it was like a family thing that we did. And that's another layer of deschooling is not thinking, these are the things we're watching for the kids. And then I have my own things. Like, no, to come to it. And it ties back to like how they're we can bring our full selves and find interesting things, right? Yeah. Even in kids' shows, right? Yeah. There are fascinating themes and you know what, even if it's not something that's super interesting, maybe the topic to us, also, like you were saying, seeing their joy, right? Yeah. And we're learning more about them just by the things that they're choosing. So we can get like just a whole range out of it. So it's not that time that we're giving up because we're watching and doing the things they like and waiting for our own time, but we can fully be present and embracing that for ourselves, can't we?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we look forward to it. Like I look forward to that time. It's like, oh, what's happening next? Like what's happening in this show? And that's pretty cool. Now that my daughter's a bit older, that she's 12, we have more show. Like I get to share some shows with her that I've watched. And so that's been like really cool to share different series together and get to see like how she experiences it and then experiencing it again, kind of like through the lens of also knowing that she's watching it is just a whole other experience, which has been really cool. So
I guess I can bring a story that this doesn't have to end when we get older, right? This is how we engage and connect and live together. So Lissy's 26 now, and she visited last month for the first time this year. And I had watched Schitt's Creek recently. So I'm like, I think you're gonna love this, Lizzie. So we started, she's like, sure, I'll try it. Because she had heard good things about it too. So we started watching it together while she was here. Like when we had a moment, we'd watch a couple episodes, or when it was later in the evening, we'd end up like watching 4 episodes before we went to bed and stuff like that. We ended up watching like the first season and a half. And so we're recording this call, the Emmys were last night, the distanced Emmys were last night, and Schitt's Creek won a whole bunch of Emmys, right?
That's awesome.
It was their last season. So we ended up in Messenger, like having an hour-long kind of conversation back and forth, all about that we were diving more into that and learning more about who the creator was and what actor he was, what role, the whole dealio. So these connections, just by passing things back and forth, like this happened to be one that I showed her. Like I said, Supernatural is one that she showed me years ago. It's just about being in relationship with another person. It's not so much about parent-child, right?
Yeah.
It's about enjoying each other and being in relationship and connecting, and that kind of thing doesn't have to ever end. It's just so fun.
I love that. And I love that. I think that's that just to hear that story from the future is wonderful. Since we're kind of more I guess we're not at the beginning, we're maybe in like the middle.
Mm-hmm.
But I do I think in the beginning, like when I had kids, I was always so scared of like the teenage years and kind of like that development time. And I'm like, oh, it's going to be so scary and I'm not ready for it. And then I think the more that we came into unschooling and the more I learned about it and the more I was able to really bring that relationship to the forefront, it's so different. Like now I'm so excited about this stage, and it's like this whole new level that we get to develop and share together and kind of just see where like her mind is at and her development is at, and the interests that we get to share and talk about now. It's a totally different mind shift, which I know unschooling is all about, like those mind shifts, but it's a fun stage now that I look forward to versus before it seemed like so daunting. But so that's been really nice. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And that leads very nicely into the next question, because I would like to hear a bit more about how you discovered unschooling and what your move to unschooling looked like.
So for me, I think I called it more kind of like an unfolding. It wasn't really like this big, like, boom, this is unschooling and we're going to do it. I kind of found it along the way in different times. So like I said, like my background is in teaching. So that was, my perspective. That's kind of how I was coming into parenting and schooling. So I didn't even, homeschooling wasn't something I'd even considered before I had kids. But I do know that like in the beginning, when my daughter was younger and people started talking about school, I found attachment parenting, and that really resonated with me. And so, just being able to build those types of relationships with my kids was important. And then when it came time to school, I was kind of like, oh, but these are really cool, different environments, but I want to be part of it too. Like, why don't I get to participate? And, we kept looking. We tried different kinds of preschools for her. Some that were really neat. Like I learned about Reggio Emilia and all this like art. It kind of opened my perspective of different types of learning and different types of experiences. But nothing kind of fit just right? Like I kept looking at all these environments and I'm like, yes, but not yet. I'm like, that's not it. And that's not it. And I was like, am I being too picky? And I'm like, okay, let's keep trying. And, but I think like the idea of homeschooling kind of started to like plant some seeds in my mind. And then one day we were like the first time I ever heard someone say unschooling, like I remember we were sitting at the beach on the weekend. And it was this mom, 2 young kids, kind of the same age as mine. And she was really friendly, and she said the word unschooling. And I was like, I've never even heard this term before. And I was like, so curious. And she's like, yeah. So she explained it a little bit to me. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. But, it still didn't, it was just something I heard. And so, we kind of went on with our different discovery of what was the right setting for us. And then, so I think going into kindergarten, I finally realized that it was more like, it wasn't really fitting us as a family. And I'm like, okay, we're going to try it kind of more like on a trial basis. Let's see how it goes. But homeschooling was a possibility at this stage. And I just remember being kind of in that setting with her, and kind of, she had been this like really joyful, creative little kid. And she was always painting, like her clothes always had paint on them. And she always had a story or a song. And I remember that in kindergarten, we were sitting for like 2 hours doing homework. And I'm like, this doesn't feel right. This isn't okay. And then I noticed that she just didn't have time to be creative in her day. And I'm like, this doesn't fit. This isn't us. And so I realized this is it, like homeschooling is for us. We're going to try this. And so we kind of just, we decided this is what we're doing. We'll take it day by day, year by year. And so we tried kind of a different approaches, different curriculums. And I think like this is kind of the process that I've always taken with my kids. Like I really learned kind of what we needed as a family through them. So like for my daughter, I always call her like the quietest rebel. Like she's definitely not the loudest person in the room, but she's a huge observer, and she's really taking things in on her own and kind of showing us that, this is how kind of things to be, and this is how I see the world, and this is a little bit different, and let's explore this. And along the way, like we tried all these different approaches, and they weren't fitting. It wasn't us. It wasn't a right fit for us. And during that time, like I kept hearing about unschooling from some of the friends that we had at the park that were becoming closer friends, and it just kind of kept becoming a theme that I kept hearing. And then my friends invited book club that I know they had come and done a podcast with you about the book club, and we started reading the Free to Learn. And for me, it was just like, I thought I was just going into it because I was curious and I love a good book club, and I wanted to learn how people learn and this approach. And then I started reading your book, and I was like, this speaks to me. Like, this is it. Like, this is us. Like, I found this rhythm that makes so much sense to us. And it was in a time where we were really trying to focus on relationship building in our family and connection, and having that be like the forefront of the focus of our family life. And it fits so nicely with us and what we wanted as a family and what the kids needed individually and together. And so we kind of jumped into that journey of unschooling, and it made sense for us. It from there, it really just kind of unfolded so nicely, and kind of just, all the pieces fell into place in the pockets, and just being able to kind of, I realized it was kind of a part of what the core of like just really being able to like focus on our individual interests and our individual passions and our connection. Like that's kind of what I wanted from the beginning. I just didn't know it had a name, it had an approach, it had a style. And so it's just, for me, it was just such a beautiful kind of awakening.
I love the way you talked about that because the way you were describing all the different things you tried, like right in there, I could see the core was like, well, this doesn't quite work for us. Yeah. You were looking at your kids. You were trying to find what worked and fit well for everybody, so you already had that mindset. Like you said, it was just keep exploring different things, trying different things until one meshed better.
It fit.
Yeah. I love that. And I love the idea of just taking it a day at a time, a year at a time. When you kind of dive in, we talk about, you often need to give it, 6 months a year, because for a lot of families, it's a bigger change, right? And there's a lot of deschooling around even how you see learning.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right? But it doesn't need to be a forever decision, just like going to school doesn't need to be a forever decision, right? So I think that sometimes that can help take the weight off of people, and you can get into the moment and say, is this working for us? Learning who your kids really are and seeing all the learning that's happening even when they're playing the computer game and when you guys are together, right?
I love that. For me, like just from learning about unschooling, for me, it was kind of like just removing these like kind of blinders I had or that you tend to have, that you can only see like learning in one place. Mm-hmm. And then like the minute you take it off, it's everywhere. Like how do you unlearning? Like it's just always happening and in every situation, and kind of like combining how like I love to learn about how people learn. For me, it's like, oh, this is amazing. Like this is, now I can't like stop looking and seeing like, what are we learning in this situation? And it's just, it's so awesome.
That's so true. It's kind of something you can't unsee. That quote, once mind stretched is by a new idea, can't go back to its original dimension.
Yeah.
I love that quote because it feels so much like once I learned about unschooling and what it was, I couldn't put those blinders back on, right? I could, all of a
Yeah.
sudden, learning was everywhere. All of a sudden, you know, it wasn't a bad thing to be having these conversations with my kids and working through our challenges. It wasn't that I was bad at telling them what to do anymore. It was like, no, we're figuring this out together, and that's good.
Yeah, and it's a process together, and I think that in of itself, like that learning of that process together, like that is so much learning, like figuring it out together. Like, what a huge learning process and experience is that, like that you have now that you're applying to later on in life. It's just all the pieces of it are so cool.
I know they are. Now, one of the core concepts of unschooling is that it asks us to respect each of our children for who they are and meet them where they are, full stop, right? You were talking about that earlier, how you were respecting your child and trying to see how each of these things meshes, and how once you discovered unschooling, everything began to unfold so much more smoothly, right? I think that's because now you were able to meet them where they are without those
Yeah.
expectations, right? And I think that's why unschooling can work so beautifully for every child, right? And we're talking about neurodivergent children as well today. And I think it encompasses any child, right? Because with unschooling, it really is all about them. It's not about us and our expectations, but that is such a powerful paradigm shift once we get there, isn't it?
Yes, 100%. Like I loved this question that you had, and I loved like how you explained it. And I love just the fact that you said full stop, like no exceptions, all acceptance. Like I found that to be like that's such a powerful message that I think so many of us and so many of our kids kind of need to hear. I think just like as a people, as humans, like we're naturally like a diverse bunch, and neurodiversity, it's just part of our natural human expression. But unfortunately, sometimes kind of as a society, we fall under the pressure of these expectations and messages that we all have to kind of fit in this certain box or this certain timeline or this certain expectation that we have. And whenever you kind of veer out of that, sometimes it seems like something is wrong or not okay. And or that, this message that people hear that you have to like fix something that doesn't seem the same or that seems different. And I think that, when we kind of take away those expectations of having to fit in this box, like we can really let people kind of see themselves for who they are and kind of just really build on that acceptance of themselves. And I think that in unschooling, like the goal of building these relationships and building these connections and that trust that you have in your children and in yourself, really to just be those partners together in the learning process. It's so vital and so important to our self-image of who we are. I think as like, if you can get to a point where you trust yourself, then you are able to kind of really see yourself and accept yourself, and all these messages are kind of turned on their head, right? Instead of not fitting in a box, we're just who we are, and that's beautiful. And that's part of our learning process, is learning who we are. And if we're able to learn who we are, then what we can do with that learning and who we can become and who we are is so much bigger than these boxes that we think that we have to fit into. And I just really love that part of unschooling and how it fits with neurodiversity, and just really being able to kind of just that full stop acceptance, like you said, like that should be our kind of message with everybody. And I love that unschooling brings that. And when I hear that, I'm like, oh, I want that to be everybody's story. I want everybody to feel that kind of, just radical acceptance of who they are and get to kind of really discover who they are. because it's so awesome. Everybody is their own individual awesome self. We all have different things that might be a little bit harder, more challenging than others, but that's also part of the learning, that we all have a different learning process. And when we learn from each other, it's that much more interesting and exciting, I think.
And there's so much in there, isn't it? Because I mean, and number one, like back to when we were talking about like just engaging with our kids in interesting things and seeing how they bring themselves into all the things that they're doing, all their interests, the way they approach things. We see how we don't need to fit everybody into that box. We learn how everybody's boxes really are beautiful for them, right? Where they are. And that's totally okay, right? Because you see them shine in their spaces, right?
100%, yeah.
And we don't need to tell them that there's something wrong with their space and they really need to be over here. But like you said, we can help them learn so much about themselves. And, maybe we can think of those spaces as their comfort zones, right? And we can help them. Yeah, we can help them over the years. And that's it. Take a moment. We, as adults, are learning and growing and changing. Right? Like this
every day.
Yeah, exactly. This does not need to be done in their childhood. They don't need to be finished, right? That is yet another beautiful piece of this whole puzzle that we don't need to, back to when you're talking about timelines, right? And curriculums and timetables and other people's timetables for us. We don't need that, and that we don't need to impose that on their lives, and we can just help them explore their space, right? That's what, when we talk about neurodiversity and we talk about any, physical challenges, like any kind, there is a wide, beautiful spectrum of people, and we're okay where we are. And when we look through their eyes, right, we can help them. Maybe there are places where they'd like to stretch. Maybe there are things that they'd like to do that are more challenging. I think people think that, if we just don't expect them to do more, they will never do more. But it's because we have spent so long putting children in boxes that they didn't want to be in and trying to force them to grow on our timetable and on our path. Yeah. We didn't get to see that there's so many ways they'd like to grow. They just happen to be in other way, right? Like kids love to learn and figure things out on their own and to learn about themselves and to learn to trust themselves, right? It's just when we can look at it through their eyes and help them, then all of a sudden we can see them as real people in action, right?
Yeah, no, I think all of that, it's beautiful. Yeah. When you're not stuck to this timeline, then you can see that learning can happen at any point, like you said. And, just because it takes you, a certain amount of time and someone else a different amount of time, that doesn't mean that you're not getting to this other learning place, that it's not, it's your process. Like you said, you got to trust yourself, your body, your experience. And that's a huge learning process in and of itself, right? Like, what does my body need to be able to do this and to be able to kind of grow in this way? And if I can be, attuned to that, if we're in unschooling and it's a partnership and we're learning together, then, I'm trusting your process, and then I'm trusting my process too, to kind of have this partnership together, to explore that. And that just leaves so much room open to grow together. And like you said, if there are areas that, you need a little more support, or you need a different type of environment to grow, then you can do that together. And there's no restrictions around you that kind of are impeding that. And then what can happen from there is just amazing. So much growth.
And it's not, we get to the place where it's not a bad thing to need that support or to want that or ask for, even for us, because it's funny how we can have expectations that our kids need to be able to do all this on their own.
Right.
Now that we're adults, we can ask for help. Like, I can ask my husband to phone XYZ and talk to them because I'm not in the mood to get into a phone call and go through all that stuff. Like literally he'd spent 3 hours with our cell phone provider and he chose not to tell them. He wanted to do the text. But we can do that. Yeah, we'd look down on our kids, you were talking about the teen years coming up, oh no, you should learn to be phoning and working that. It's okay that we can support them. Like, I'll do that for you. If you need, you can hang by in case there's a question or something that I don't know, like you figure out a path forward together, it's supporting each other rather than you need to be able to figure out all this on your own and be able to do it on your own.
Right.
It's just beautiful how that, we go back to your word unfolding. I love that word. And I love that it's better to be just curious as to how things will unfold rather than having your path and trying to morph everybody in it and have those expectations. Like
into that way, yeah,
their ability to learn about themselves and learn to trust themselves. I think that was another huge piece of what you mentioned, like that they're capable of figuring things out, even if in figuring that out, it's like, can you help me with this? And can you help me with this? But they're getting where they want to go, right?
Yeah.
That's they don't need to do everything independently. I think that's a message conventionally that has kind of gone overboard and is getting in our way, like that we need to be able to do it all by ourselves or else, it's a failure of some sort. Yeah, no.
Yeah. And as a society, I mean, we're humans, like humans function by needing other humans and working together in groups. Like we're social group people. And I think that so many times we're kind of like stuck in that fear expectation of like, oh, you have to be independent. And if you're not independent now, you're not going to be independent later. And so it's kind of like this like pushed independence, all with the best intention, but it kind of gets in the way of that connection and of that actually being able to develop that independence when you're ready, like on your timeline, right? Like it's everyone's timeline of being ready to do something on their own is going to be different. They said sometimes we might still need, other people, and that's okay too. And that's important to figure out how to have other people help us and how to get that help that we need. But I think like one of my favorite stories with my son when he is doing that is, he's always had, a tough time with heights. Heights are not his favorite thing. And so, things that for other people might seem not as intimidating, for him, I know that through his perspective, it's a bit intimidating if there's a height. And so it's okay. Like through unschooling, I felt confident that I could support him when he needed it. And that in his time, he would get there. And so, if he needed my hand or if he needed some help getting down from a space, I was there, kind of always aware that this was something that was a challenge that he was working on, and all in his own time, no pushed. And then one day we were at one of these like jumping trampoline zones, and all the friends were climbing up and kind of jumping down with a harness from one of these like higher posts. And, I've never pushed him to do it. It was if he wanted to try it, you can try it. And in one of those times, I'm talking with the other mom, and I look, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to try it. And he has the harness on him, and he's climbing up the thing. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And like, you can see he was a bit nervous, but he's like, I'm going to do this. I want to try it. And he did it. And like, he like threw himself off the thing. And, he's aware. He'll say like, heights are not my favorite thing. They're a bit intimidating. But look, I did this and I wanted to do it. And so I did it. And, it was, for him, it was a huge thing. And it was so awesome. And there was so much learning that I could see in that process, like of understanding himself, understanding what he needed, learning to know when he could trust himself that he was ready and that was okay. And he could try it or he could not try it until he was ready. And it was like a joyful experience. Like there wasn't like this like huge fear or pressure. And to me, it was just so beautiful and so affirmative of this is our process, and look how nice it can unfold when the timeline is yours and the learning is yours, and you can kind of take ownership of that. And I think that's so cool and so important.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine that experience from his perspective and how different it could have been if, you said this was this time when we were there. So if all the other times, people, you try that, go up. Oh, you can do it, and then he would be taking on that
Yeah,
weight, and that would interfere so much in him figuring out when he was ready,
right.
because he'd
Perfect.
have all those other expectations mixed up in there, and would lower, I think, his ability to trust himself to choose when he was ready for it, and that was totally okay. I mean, that is just a beautiful example of what they can do when you meet them where they are,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
That where they are in this moment is completely okay. Like, that's where you lean into first, right? You meet them
Yeah.
there, and you help them from there. And that's one of the things I find so interesting with, unschooling and neurodiversity, right now, is that back to that core concept, it's really not different, right? How we treat a neurodiverse child versus, a neurotypical kind of child, because we're meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
And
100%. Yeah.
we're helping them figure out what the things that they want to do and how to do them. We're supporting them. And I guess when, if you start looking at it from the things that you do and the things that you support, they may look different, but they look different for all individuals as well,
For
right?
everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah. And
like
I
you
think that
said,
that's
that's it was a longer time than typical for him to do this particular thing, and it may have been even longer, right? It's not
mhm.
the point. But yeah, you met him where he was and supported him whenever he was ready for it. It's their timetable that's important, right?
I think so. I mean, like you said, I think the concepts that we apply to like neurodiversity, we apply them to everybody. It's so promising. It's so encouraging. It's so healthy to us to kind of accept ourselves and trust ourselves, because we all have those, like, self doubts or challenges, and if we can all kind of use that view, then it's just a cohesive view for everybody, I think.
That's what you're saying. I just want everybody to know about this, right?
Everybody. Yeah, I think it's awesome. I mean, I love watching kind of like that process for kids that you've seen that have been experiencing that unschooling approach, that unschooling lifestyle, just that trust that they're starting to develop in themselves, and that awareness and that space to kind of get to know themselves. I feel like so oftentimes we all even reach adulthood, and we haven't had that space and that time to get to know ourselves, to trust ourselves. Like, how many times do we kind of like get to college and now we're like, oh, now we get to make choices, and now what do I do, and now who am I, right? Like, I've talked to my husband about this so much. Like, college becomes this time that we discover who we are, and I'm like, imagine who we could discover if we're able to do this from when we're younger. Like, if we're starting out from the beginning with this like freedom to explore ourselves and understand who we are, like, I think that that's so cool, so empowering. Like, imagine who we are, like, and what we can know about ourselves if our journey starts from the beginning,
Yeah.
getting to trust that space. So
Yeah, no. I remember the first year of university, and the first year students just like exploding, because all of a sudden they had all
yeah,
this freedom, and
yeah,
really had no experience with how to how to manage their days, like how they wanted to, even if they're choosing to be there, it's like, whoa, but I could do all these things that I could never do before. Yeah, that was a pretty
yeah, it's
wild
true.
time, wasn't it? And I love, you were talking earlier about wanting, enjoying and looking towards being a neurodiversity ally, and in that area too, because I just want to go back to that, because this lifestyle and approach to living with them is so extra helpful for groups that are judged more harshly,
Yes.
typically, right? just being able to bring to them that it's okay wherever they are,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
That you're good, that we can meet you there and we can help you instead of presupposing what your path should be, because, and the wonderful thing with unschooling of them following their own paths, like people worry, but they won't learn this or they won't hit that. But if you're following your path, you're not going to all of a sudden jump 6 feet in another direction in a spot where I know absolutely nothing about this. Like typically, you're veering and you're taking sideways steps and you're turning a corner here and everything, but they're not going to become a different person completely overnight, right? So what they're learning now relates to who they are and will always relate to who they are, right? So the worry that, but they're missing all this other stuff, maybe their path will take them towards it, maybe not, but it doesn't matter. It's their path. They're walking towards being more of who they want to be, right? Does that make sense?
No, 100%. Yeah, they get to find their authentic self, and their authentic self is the learning process. And like you said, like they'll find along the way that the things that they need to learn to be who that authentic self that they are, that they want to be. And I think that that's so important. I mean, to the academic subjects, I think in the end are really just kind of a part of the learning, not really essentially the core of it. The core of it is us learning how we learn and who we are and how we're going to apply that to the world, and how are we going to interact with the world with that information. And I think if we don't have the space to know ourselves and to accept ourselves, then that's where the real challenge kind of comes in, and that's where we don't get to really explore our own stories and our own paths. And that's why I love unschooling for everybody.
No, I love that point too, because truly, like learning about the world itself, like the facts and things like that, that can be done anytime, right? It really is more important to learn about ourselves and how we tick, and our strengths, our weaknesses, support, like figuring out just how we like to engage with the world and exploring how that works for us and how we grow and change over time, so that we're not like static and kind of stuck in a singular view of how this is how we do things. That is, like you said, just so much more valuable information and skills, right, to take with us moving forward, rather than the facts of this, that, and how we literally do this, that, and the other thing. Those can be picked up anytime, right?
And I think this is for one of your other questions, but I think it fits so nicely here in what you're saying about, kind of absorbing all these different informations or kind of landing at these, expected knowledge points. I think a lot of times, like, everyone has, specific interests, but especially like, neurodiverse individuals tend to have really strong interests, like areas that they can really like dive into and explore. And the places that can take you and the amount of information and knowledge that you can acquire when you are like diving into like your area of interest, it's just amazing. And like, you can cover so many things just from that one area of interest. Maybe it doesn't even seem like something that you would expect, to have so much information, but it can like go into so many directions. Like for me, like my son was really into Pokemon and like really dived into Pokemon. And so, his first like real reading came because he was just absorbed in this manual of Pokemon and like just had to look at it like all day and check out all the characters, and we read the names all the time. I tried to pronounce the names of these Pokemon and learn their names. There's so many, but he knows them all. And it was so cool. He brought me the book and he was saying the names. He's like, I think I read the name of this Pokemon. I'm like, you did? I'm like, that's amazing. And so, just that that joy and ownership in their learning when they're really interested in it and really invested. And then, that interest in the Pokemon led to realizing that Pokemon are developed, the person who made Pokemon, and that he actually based them on real life insects and animals and reptiles. And so now that interest has dived into like reptiles and animals and birds, and he has all these like amazing insights and information about all these animals. And one of our fun things that we like to do is think up of an animal and see if there's a Pokemon about it. And then if not, like we'll make a Pokemon up or something, because he loves to develop characters. So then we have to figure out how to make this character come to life. But it's so cool. I'm like, look at that. Like one interest can go to so many different places. And now it's like, oh, where are these animals from? Like where in the world, does this animal come from? So now you're talking about geography and culture and environment. And it's just, it's so cool how you can like span so many subjects on an interest if you're really able to like have that space to dive into it. I think it's just so awesome. And people worry sometimes about neurodivergent individuals that they get kind of focused and zoned in on a special interest. But I think that's the amazing part, is that there is this like focus and intensity of attention that we don't always give to subjects. And it's when you give that intensity and attention to a subject that all these like discoveries can come about, and all this like, unfolding of information and knowledge that can just kind of happen. So I think it's super cool.
Well, I love, as you said, how the conversation just flowed right through the questions. I will just say that was other ways in which you Unschooling supporting neurodiversity. Dive in. That is a beautiful way, right? Yes, they tend to focus and really dive into something deep, which, yes, when you're not trying to distract them and you're actually meeting them where they are, you realize how amazing that is. Like, I think of passions like that really can be a window to the whole world. And you shared beautiful examples, into bugs and insects and different animals, and then into the geography, and then learning about those animals. And I mean, it can go so many places. Reading. And then if he wants to participate in forums, it could eventually, go to writing. And I mean, it's just amazing. All those life skills like reading and writing and communication and just analysis and research, like all those skills that will be helpful forever and ever, can come through any interest.
Yeah.
Right? It's just so beautiful to see how when they dive into something, it's totally okay, because there will be so many different aspects to it, right?
I love that. And I think too, like in that when you get to dive into your interest and you're so excited about it, like that helps build connection too, right? Like that social aspect of finding someone else who's also sharing that interest, and that connection that happens, it's exciting. And I think that's, another piece that sometimes people get a little bit worried about like that social connection and that communication piece. But when you're connecting with someone over something you're really interested in, it's exciting, and the connection and the relationships just kind of flow from that. And so I think that lends itself to that too. So there's so many ways that it kind of just comes together. Yeah,
no, I love that. It's, again, meeting them where they are, right? And I know we've been talking in the network about this bit, about how when we meet them where they are and we support them, okay, so now we want to help them engage more in the ways that they want to, in the interest that they have, right? Like you said, then you start to find other people who are just as interested, like watching two kids, or kid and an adult, whatever, fascinated with Pokemon, having a conversation is just beautiful, isn't it?
It's so cool. It's so amazing. The information and knowledge that they have about the topic and the topics related to it and the topics that come from it, it's mind-blowing to me. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah. And maybe somebody's gone down one rabbit hole that the other one hasn't. So they're like, oh, wow, I never even thought of that. And then they're off to do that. And they're just, they're just bouncing off each other. And just think of how exciting and valid. I mean, think when it happens to ourselves, right? Podcast calls,
Yeah.
excited about unschooling, right? I mean, it is energizing, it's inspiring, it's just all those social things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even if it's online, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's still so much connection that can happen there.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Thank you so much. Were there any other pieces that you wanted to bring up with that question? Like that's a huge one. Any other way?
I think it was that deep, just being able to do that like deep dive into your interests and your passions and kind of where that can lead you. It's such a huge part of neurodiverse people's experience, that just having the space and the validation to be able to kind of enjoy that and dive into that is just awesome. Because then when you feel validated and then you feel accepted, and you learn to trust yourself and you learn to have this confidence in yourself, and then that's just like a domino effect of learning and growth that happens. And I see the potential for this to go this route. And that's why I'm like, if we could like just combine these two worlds of like neurodiversity and unschooling. I mean, I love it for everyone, but especially for this population that is, they need and deserve that validation, that acceptance, and that space to be them authentically. I just think it's a beautiful connection.
Oh, I have goosebumps because I mean, that is their life, and to celebrate their life and the way they want to live it, the way it's beautiful. And then, you'll see over the years, various interests, like various deep dives, they may last months, they may last years, whatever, but the process is being validated for them, right? So then when they go and they find the next thing, it's beautiful to see, and they feel, validated is, I guess, the best word, too, and excited to explore. Like, this is a great way to explore something. The way that I love to do it is wonderful. So that is such a huge piece. Thank you. So what is it about unschooling that makes it a great fit for your family? I think, that is a huge piece of it. And we've touched on various things, like you were talking the family time, getting together and everything, but I just thought that would be a fun kind of summary for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, like it just fits the rhythm of our lives. It fits like who we are as individuals. It fits kind of how we want to connect with each other and the experiences that we want to share. It allows for that opportunity for those, deep dives of interest, because we all have like really big interests, and then sharing that kind of like joy together. One thing that I really liked, because when I asked I asked the family and the kids, kind of what they liked about our unschooling life. And I thought it was so cool. My son was like, oh, that I get to have free will. And I was like, well, that's like a huge concept. And I didn't even know that he was kind of exploring that idea in his head, which is another cool part of unschooling, is that there's always these learning surprises that are happening, and things that they're piecing together and picking up, even though you don't have this explicit, like sit down, like lecture conversation about it sometimes. But just that, that they're kind of picking up on that idea that they have this autonomy and these choices, and that they're learning that about themselves, so that they can build that trust and that awareness and validation about themselves. To me, is that's such a huge goal of mine, so that we can like explore that and really develop that. And unschooling for me has been super important and part of kind of what we love of how it works for us as a family. Aside from just, being able to have this like joyful learning experience, and that the joy is really in there in the learning process, and it's more, the stress gets to melt away in that part, and it's just there's enough kind of stressor parts of life. And I feel like this learning process for us is joyful and happy and, just so fun to explore together, and that we get to really have that fun together through this time period. And hopefully as that changes as we grow, then we'll explore that too.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love the way you talked about it as in all of you together, because it really is the way that human beings kind of operate.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that curiosity, the diving, the free will, the ability to make choices, to develop trust and confidence in ourselves. Like all those pieces are things that human beings want. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so beautiful when we can all do that together.
Together, yeah.
Yeah, without there's no age thing in that. Like we're all human beings, right? And once you start it and you live it for a while, you see how capable and beautiful it is in children too. Like that we can all just dive into it together, right?
That's awesome.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, Michelle. It was so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Pam. This has been awesome. Just to be able to speak with you and to chat about all these topics is just awesome.
It's so fun, isn't it? Like it is. It's really beautiful.
Yes.
I'm excited to
keep talking about it.
The word. And before we go, where can people connect with you online?
So my email is michellemorcate@gmail.com. So I'm always kind of available through there. And so we've also kind of started this homeschooling group to kind of get the message out to families that homeschooling and learning experience can be fun, and kind of also inviting like the neurodiverse population to join us on this journey. It's called That Awesome AUSOME Homeschool Club. And so we're kind of trying to kind of get community going so that we can kind of enjoy that process together through all of our diversity. So that's another place to find me.
Yay, that's awesome. Yeah, we'll put links to that in the show notes too. Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you, Pam.
Bye.